Hello, welcome to Web of Stories. My name is Melinda, and I am here to wrap up April 2024. Now, if you've never seen one of my wrap-ups, I have sort of a format that I follow. So I will go through this, but I'm going to let you know now that there are 3 books I will not be talking about that I read this month, and those are for the BookTube prize. If you are interested in knowing what I thought of those, come back in June when I do a BookTube prize wrap-up. April ended up being a really surprising month when I actually looked at what I read and how everything worked out. So yeah, I was surprised, but it makes sense. I read 13 books in April, which is a lot, but it's a little low for me, and that's okay. I realized I kind of need to slow down a bit. I'm reading too many books at once. I'm starting to feel stressed by it, so I'm trying to just slow down a bit. Plus, I read some big books. That 13, by the way, does include the 3 books for the BookTube prize. And then the breakdown, and this is what really surprised me, the breakdown between fiction and nonfiction this month, 4 were fiction and 9 were nonfiction. Now, I always try to read a good amount of nonfiction, but I've never had a month where I read more nonfiction than fiction, much less over twice as much. So that really surprised me when I saw it. I didn't realize it. I think that's because some of the nonfiction I read was kind of narrative-ish, memoir-y. So there, and also the BookTube prize because I'm doing the nonfiction round. So 3 of those were in that 9 were for the BookTube prize. I didn't DNF any books, so that's good. It actually is good. Sometimes it's not good that I not good that I did not DNF any books, but this month it's good because my average rating was 3.8. And when I get down to it, you'll see that none of my books are below a recommended or 3-star. And let me break it out by format. So 7 of the books I read were in print, 2 were ebooks, 4 were audiobooks, but because I didn't do a Shakespeare play this month, I did a poem, which I still have like 5 pages left to read. I meant to do it yesterday and I forgot. I'm filming this on the 1st of May, by the way, I should say that. But there was no tandem reading or anything like that this month. So I'm going to go through the books, minus the BookTube prize books that I finished this month, and I'm going to go kind of by rating, and I'm going to start with the group that I put in the recommended group. These are generally 3-star books, and they're books that I would recommend, maybe with some caveats. They may not be perfect, but I'd still recommend them, or they're really good, but I'd only recommend them to certain people very strictly on that. And I had 4 books in this category. The first one is the short story collection, 50 Beasts to Break Your Heart by GennaRose Nethercott. These are kind of weird, horror-ish stories. I didn't find it's definitely creepy at times. I never found it frightening. Great stories, great writing. Just some of them were too weird for me. Like I was like, I don't know what's happening. I just don't. So apparently my weird threshold was a little bit too low for this. The next book I have, it was an audiobook that I did from the library, so I'm going to put the pictures up for those, and that is On the Hippie Trail, Istanbul to Kathmandu and the Making of a Travel Writer by Rick Steves. So the reason this one is in here, it's good, but I really, really think that you should not be reading this book unless you know who Rick Steves is. I think if you just go into it not knowing who Rick Steves is, you're going to expect something different from this book. You're going to expect travel writing. And it's not that this isn't travel writing, but it kind of isn't. These are just he does say lightly edited journals that he wrote like 50 years before, when he and his best buddy did a little tour from Istanbul to Kathmandu. Actually, they started it, I think, in Bulgaria. And if you don't know who Rick Steves is, you don't kind of get what you're thinking of. Because yeah, he talks about the travels, but it's really an origin story for what Rick Steves became in 2 different ways. The first is Rick Steves. If you don't know who he is, I think everyone in the United States and Canada, because I was watching Elizabeth de Boken's books fill her bookshelves, and she had Rick Steves books, so Canadians. He's from the Pacific Northwest, so that makes sense. I mean, we in the Pacific Northwest want to be Canadian, so we're Canadian wannabes, please take us. But yeah, I don't know how well known Rick Steves is known outside of North America, Canada, and the United States. But he's a travel person. He has a TV show that in the United States is on public television called Rick Steves Europe, where he goes around. He's really known for European travel. He has a company that leads tours. He has a luggage company, which makes the best luggage. He's just known for this. And he's sort of the expert on European travel for North Americans. So this is really the beginning of how, because when he started on this, he was a piano teacher, and that's what he thought his job was going to be. He was going to be a musician / piano teacher. And he came home after this and said, I'm done. I want to do this for a living. So this is what really created Rick Steves as we know him. It also is his origin story for being a pothead. So there is that too. But as I said, it's really for people who know who Rick Steves is, because then you're going to really appreciate what this is. Also, I would highly recommend it on audio because he narrates it, and we're just used to Rick Steves' voice, even though my kids thought he was Casey Kasem. So, and it does really well. It's Rick Steves' voice. That's what you expect. And there's a lot of pictures that he references in it because he takes a lot of pictures on his trips. You can go to his website and pull up all the pictures that are in the print book, so you won't be missing anything in that. Okay, this third book I read, I have on digital on my e-reader, so I don't have it here. And this was I'll get down to it. This is Funny in Farsi, a memoir of growing up Iranian in America by Firoozeh Dumas. This is a very delightful, light story of a girl who came to America. She's like, I don't know, like 7 when they came to America, and sort of funny observations. It's enjoyable. It isn't going to rock your world. It's not going to change your view of the world. She came to the United States right before the Iranian Revolution, and it sounds like, it's not really clear on this, it sounds like they were in the United States during, and that's what made them stay in the United States. So she came as an immigrant to the United States at a very different time. And it's much lighter. So there you go. I enjoyed it. It's a fun little read. There you go. And then finally, my last book in this category, if you saw my video, you know what this is. Agatha Christie's Taken at the Flood. This was on the way to being a very strong, definitely 4-star, possibly even 5-star book for me. Until I got to the last chapter where I put my little stop thing, so when I pick this up again, I know not to read it. I almost took this down from 4, almost 5, to 2 stars because of that last chapter. And then I stood back. I said, it's just one chapter. You don't even have to read because everything wraps up in the chapter before it. You don't even have to read that last chapter. Agatha Christie clearly didn't like that chapter either. You kind of get that from that chapter. So just take 1 star off, which is why this is in the recommended and not highly recommended. Again, if you're going to read this, put a sticky on the last chapter that says stop and then don't read it. I know when I did my last video, a bunch of people said now they really want to read the last chapter, and go right ahead. Just don't come crying to me. Okay, there you go. So now we're on to the books that I rated highly recommended. So this is 4 stars. These are just books I'd recommend to anybody. They're great books. And the first one I have is the group read for People April, which is Raising Hare by Chloe Dalton. Chloe Dalton is a political journalist, I believe, in the UK, and during the pandemic, she had purchased like a cottage in the town where she grew up in England, and she moved out there, and she rescued this baby hare, or as we call them in the United States, jackrabbits, which will be important to what I'm going to say in a moment, and then raised it, and this is sort of talking about that, and I really enjoyed it. I couldn't get past 2 things, one of which I went about with a spoiler thing in the video. You're gonna have to go back and see that because I don't want to go it again. But the other thing is, as I said, jackrabbits in the United States. These sound, when you're reading the book, they sound like so cute, right? If you've never seen a jackrabbit, they are the weirdest looking thing. And I couldn't get that out of my head. They might be cute when they're babies, but when they are no longer babies, they are really weird looking. And I had that sort of like mental disconnect there. But otherwise, I did really enjoy this. And then I have this one, which I have talked about, Queens of the Crusades, England's Medieval Queens, Book 2 by Alison Weir. And in this, we are talking we start with Eleanor of Aquitaine. We go through Berengaria of Navarre, Isabella of Angoulême, Eleanor of Provence, and Eleanor of Castile. I really enjoyed this. Now, I know this is review stuff for me, because that's what I have my degree in, right? But they got really into the women and their family lives, and these are really remarkable women for the most part. Berengaria of Navarre, maybe not so much, but notable in good and bad ways. Fascinating. I like had a hard time putting this one down. I really recommend this series. You could start with this if you're only interested in these queens, but I enjoyed the first one as well, and I think you get a nice overview if you start with the first one, which is Queens of the Conquest. There are currently soon to be 4 books. So it's this, Queens of the Age of Chivalry, which I will be reading probably this month, May. And then Queens of War, I think, is coming out in December, but really enjoyed that. Okay, and then I have this book, sticking with history. The 272, The Families Who Were Enslaved and Sold to Build the American Catholic Church by Rachel L. Swarns. Fascinating book. Infuriating, but fascinating. I just noticed the light is really weird. I'm sorry about that. It's spring. It's gonna be May. Anyway, sorry. Forgive me. Anyway, really enjoyed this book. I learned quite a bit about the Jesuits in early America, mostly in Maryland, because that's where the Jesuits went. A lot of like detail that I didn't know. Like I knew the history, but I didn't know the detail. The only reason this isn't a 5-star for me is that there were places where she would bring things up, kind of tangential points that I got really interested in, and then she never explained. So, which I kind of get, because that's not really important to the story, but I was really into it. So anyway, really enjoyed this one. Very fascinating, and I think it's an important read. And then this next book. So, as I said, I'm filming this on May 1st. I've not yet filmed my weekly wrap up. I'm not going to talk, usually like I just do everything when it kind of ends up in the year. I kind of do everything in the yearly wrap up and then say, just go see it in my weekly wrap up. But this will be the only book I am able to talk about in my weekly wrap up when I film it. So I'm not going to say much about it here. This video, of course, will be coming out after my weekly wrap up. So you probably have already heard it, but I just haven't said it yet. Booktube time is weird. And that is Such Big Dreams by Reema Patel. This tells the story of Rocky, who is, she lives in Bombay, and she had a very tough youth. She was kind of saved by a woman, and now as a young adult, she is working as sort of an office peon in this woman's, I don't know if it's actually, I don't think it is an NGO. I'm never really sure what an NGO is, but it's a human rights sort of law office, and she's kind of caught in a weird position with it, and how she's viewed by the different people around her. It took me a little while to get into it, but it ended up being a really fascinating book. As I said, you'll hear more about it, or you have heard more about it when I say it, which I haven't already, but there you go. And then I had 2 5-star books. And 5 stars are books that I consider best, all-time favorites. So they're like, yes, I highly recommend them, but there's a little bit more. And the first one's a little bit spicy. I shouldn't say spicy like it's racy, but it's a spicy take, because not everyone loves this book. I know people who hate this book, and I completely understand why. And I respect that, because I can see why you hate this book, but I am dark and twisty inside, so I loved it. And this is Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. So Madame Bovary is kind of come down to me, at least, this was the first time I'd read it, as sort of like an Anna Karenina type book. And it probably is. I think that's probably a fair comparison. However, I read Anna Karenina probably 20 years ago. And I think my personal knowledge about things and my personal language about things has changed quite a bit. So I was able to look at this story a little differently. And instead of being a story of a fallen woman, which is kind of how this is sort of generally talked about, it's a woman of a mentally ill woman. And I am not a mental health professional, but she sure seemed bipolar to me. And once I understood that, this book made so much more sense to me. And I think it's really interesting because obviously Flaubert at the time this was written in the mid-19th century, they had a much different view on mental illness and things like this, and they weren't using the same language. But this is such an accurate depiction of bipolar behavior and depression that it just shows what a keen observer Gustave Flaubert is. So that's my take on it. I will say I was surprised there's some really kind of funny parts in here, which I did not expect. I did not expect some of the humor that was in here. But yes, really, really loved this. And the final one I got from the library, which I wish I hadn't because I want it on my shelves. So I will be looking for a copy to put on my shelves. Used copy probably. Because this so far is probably my favorite book of the year so far. It's the first book that I read and I said, you know, I am definitely going to have this on my best book of the year lists. And this is a memoir. And it is How to Share an Egg, A True Story of Hunger, Love, and Plenty by Bonny Reichert. So this is a family memoir and a food memoir. Bonny Reichert is currently a food writer. She started out as a parenting writer. It goes into that in the book. But her father, well, her parent, Bonny Reichert is Jewish. She's from a Jewish family from Edmonton. So her parents, her father, this really focuses on her father, but her father was a Holocaust survivor. And a lot of this deals with the trauma that he suffered from being a Holocaust, because you can't get out of the Holocaust without a lot of trauma, but how that kind of carried down to her growing up and how she carried it herself and how she learned to sort of parse it out and deal with it and recognize it. And also she has a very close relationship with her father, but also how to reconcile that with her relationship with her father. And one of the ways they do this is through food. Her father's profession is he owns restaurants, so food is a very important part of their lives. Also, on the flip side, her maternal grandmother plays an important part in her early life. And the maternal grandmother had come to Canada a generation early, so before the Holocaust, but she had come from Ukraine to escape the pogroms. And she was a food is love sort of person. So there's also the trauma from that. And there's just the cultural love of Jewish food. And there's a lot going on here. And this one just hit me. I thought it was a very interesting food memoir, just because I love food memoirs. I thought it was a very interesting one like that. And with the trauma. Now, I have a very close relationship with my father. He is not a Holocaust survivor, but, he had a hard life too. And I saw kind of some similarities in me dealing with some of the stuff that my father had to deal with growing up and how that kind of trickled down to me. And in a much bigger case with Bonny Reichert and what she was dealing with. So highly recommend this book. It's How to Share an Egg, A True Story of Hunger, Love, and Plenty by Bonny Reichert. So those are the 10 books. I can tell you about. Is that right? 13. Yeah, 10 books I can tell you about. So let me go through what I read some of these for. We had some events going on and some buddy reads. So first of all, the big thing in April is People April. And I ended up reading 4 books for People April. The first one was, of course, Raising Hare by Chloe Dalton, which was the group read. And then I also read On the Hippie Trail by Rick Steves, which was in the running to be in the group read. I'm kind of glad it went for Raising Hare. I think Raising Hare was probably a better choice. But On the Hippie Trail, I read that. Funny and Farsi is another one. And of course, How to Share an Egg. And then in Historathon, I read Queens of the Crusades, which not surprising. That's Historathon Q2, which is 500 to 1500. And in that book, we're dealing 12th century, basically. So it fits right in. And also April was Arab American History Month, and I did not do well on this one. I was at 50% for Black History Month. I did not do as well on this one. I had 1, maybe 2 books. So I definitely had Funny and Farsi for this, but I might also have had this one. And I say might because Bombay, there is a Muslim, there's Hindus and Muslims, and there's a Muslim component to this. I don't know if the author is Muslim. The author is also Canadian, so the Arab American, but I would still count it. I don't know if I can count this book for that or not. She is Canadian, but she is of Indian descent, and I don't know if she is of Indian Muslim descent. I don't know, because it's all a thing. So 1, maybe 2 books for that. I did read 2 books for book clubs. The first one was Funny and Farsi, which I read for my marginalized book group. And again, this is a really fun book, but it is not a book club book because we really had to work at something to discuss with this book. It just isn't a book. the thing with book clubs is sometimes there just aren't things to discuss. And this is one of them. So I highly recommend, I do recommend Funny and Farsi, just not for a book club, because it's just not going to work as well. And the other one is Such Big Dreams. This is for my library book club. Now, as of filming, I have not had that discussion yet. I will be having that on the 3rd of May. So even when I talk about this in my wrap-up video, I still wouldn't have had it. So there you go. But yeah, I did read this for my library book club. I had 2 buddy reads. The first one was Madame Bovary. I did this at the beginning of the month with commenters Christina and Angela. It was such a great one. I mean, we had such great discussions about this. Yeah. And I think we all ended up really liking the book. So that's good. Because as I said, I know this is not a book for everybody. And the second one I did was with Patrice from 2 Minutes on Books. And that was the 272, which was fantastic. There was so much because we were both like learning things. Like, did you know this? Did you know that? And really discussing things. I did have a moment where I let reality kind of influence my comments, and I got a little wound up. But she understood. But yes, that was a great buddy read. And so yeah, that was how my kind of reading broke out. So let me quickly go through my stats. Currently, now I always set a yearly goal. Well, I always have. I don't know if I'm going to do it in 2026, but I mean, it's freaking May. I have time to figure this out. But my reading goal is 175. That's not really like a stretch for me. I read 198 books last year, but it's just kind of to keep me on track. As I said, I don't know if I'm going to continue doing that, but this year it's 175 and I have read 67 books, which means I'm 10 ahead of schedule. If I were to break it up and do it evenly, which whatever. That's fine because when we get to summer, that's big book summer and books take longer. So it gives me a little bit of a pillow there. Then we get to my owned TBR count. So one of my goals that I failed miserably in last year, but again, I have this year, is to finish the year with at least one less book on my owned TBR than I started with. And I am currently at 884 books on my owned TBR. Go ahead and judge me. I deserve it. Good news is that's down from last month. That's down 1. Now, if you've seen my haul and you've seen what I've read, you're saying, hey, Melinda, the math doesn't work. And you're right. That is because I unhauled a lot of books. And those will probably come up when I do my book haul revisits. I have instituted a new rule for me, which will help with this and also help me from buying books. And that is, if I get to the end of the month and I'm not down from the previous month, just from the previous month, I have to unhaul books from my physical owned TBR to get me to 0 at least. So yeah, you should not see positive numbers in that for the rest of the year, which is good because I'm still up 21 for the year. So it's doable. I can get it down. I just need to work at it. So for print, I'm at 325 owned print books, which is down 2 from last month, but up 21 for the year. And then ebooks, I'm at 493 because those dang ebook sales, which is up 2 from last month and up 1 for the year. And if you break it down, I have 127 Kindle books, which is the same as last month. I'm down 1 for the year. And then Kobo, I have 366, which is up 2 from last month because silly me went and looked when I was on the Kobo site, looked at the sales. Anyway, and I'm up 2 for the year. I should also say that I have since gotten an e-reader where I can use the Bookshop app. So I probably won't be purchasing books from Kobo anymore. I'll be purchasing them from Bookshop. And so because the way it's hard to, I already have everything set up in my spreadsheets and everything. So Kobo is now going to be Kobo/Bookshop. I'm just going to put them together. Now for audio, I currently have 64 audiobooks that I have not listened to, owned. That's down 1 from last month and down 2 for the year. And if you break those down, I have 14 Audible books. I actually have a lot more than that, but I'm not going to listen to them. So we digitally unhauled them. That's the same as last month and down for 1 year. And for Libro, I have 50. And it's down 1 from last month and down 1 for the year. So that is my April. Down below, I have all the books I've mentioned. I also have links to my affiliate page on Bookshop if you want to buy them. No pressure, just it's easy to find them there if you want to read more. I do get a little kickback, but again, no pressure. And yeah, so I'm interested to hear how everybody else's April went. It's May now. I still have to do my weekly wrap up where you will hear more about this book. That's coming up. Well, it's not coming up. It's already happened for you. It's coming up for me. Booktube time is weird. Okay, that's it. Like, subscribe, join my Discord, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.